Good evening, dear listeners, and a very warm welcome to you all. Wherever you are tuning in from tonight, maybe cozied up in bed, listening from your favourite quiet corner at home, or perhaps relaxing somewhere peaceful with the world fading away outside. I'm so glad you've joined me here. Take a slow, deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Maybe pull the covers up a bit higher and feel the day gently slip away. The Swedish archipelago glittered like a jewel under the midnight sun of summer solstice. Elegant villas perched on rocky islands, every guest in fine attire playing their part in a lavish celebration. Then Baroness Ingrid von Sturm was found drowned in the cold Baltic waters, her silk gown tangled in seaweed. A tragic accident during the festivities, the local police whispered. But Hercule Poirot saw a meticulously staged performance. Someone among the elite gathering had directed this deadly drama. The role of the innocent bystander, the role of the devoted family, the role of the murderer. The curtain rises. Chapter 1. The stage is set. The private island of Skagordholm lay like a polished jewel in the Swedish archipelago, the perfect stage for Baroness Ingrid von Sturm's famous summer solstice gala. Yachts swayed gently in the clear midnight waters, of their mahogany decks gleaming under the pale glow of the never-setting sun. Guests stepped ashore in silk evening gowns and crisp linen suits, the rustle of fabric mingling with the soft lap of waves. The air carried expensive Chanel perfume, hothouse roses, and the faint drift of Cuban cigar smoke. The villa rose behind them, an Art Deco vision of white marble terraces, velvet-curtained windows, and crystal chandeliers that tinkled like distant applause. Hercule Poirot, invited as a guest of honour, arrived with his usual precision. He noted immediately how the setting demanded performance, every smile rehearsed, every gesture elegant. This was no simple celebration. It was theatre, and the solstice night provided endless twilight for the actors to play their parts. Baroness Ingrid von Sturm moved among her guests like the undisputed leading lady. Her laughter rang across the terrace where champagne bubbled in icy flutes, the dry taste sharp on the tongue. Her kid gloves brushed hands softly. Her Worth perfume trailed behind her like a signature scent. Yet Poirot's green eyes caught the small dissonances, a glance held too long, a smile that failed to warm the eyes. Beneath the refinement, something waited to be revealed. Just after midnight, as the solstice bonfire snapped and spat on the beach, a scream cut through the music. Sharper than the grandfather clock's chime in the hall, it pulled every guest toward the rocky shore. Footsteps crunched over pebbles. There lay the Baroness face down in the shallow Baltic water, her silk gown tangled in dark seaweed, her body already cold as the marble statues lining the garden path. A police launch arrived soon after, engine growling low like a stagehand moving scenery. The officers murmured of accident, too much champagne, a slip on wet rocks during a midnight swim. But Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head and touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. Mon ami, he said softly to the night air, this drowning, it is arranged too neatly. Observe, the body lies just so, presented as if for the front row. No, this is no mishap, this is direction. Watch this performance carefully, mes amis. The guests cluster, faces arranged in shock and grief. Is it truth or theatre? The suspects formed naturally, like a cast taking their marks under sudden spotlight. Baron Karl von Sturm, the husband, stood rigid in rough tweed, and performing the devastated widower. His heavy sandalwood cologne clashed with the salt air. His hands trembled as he clutched his wife's damp shawl. Daughter Elsa von Strohm, pale and fragile in silk, pressed a crisp linen napkin to dry eyes that shed no tears. Countess Olga Petrovna fanned herself with gloved hands, her thick Russian accent wrapping expressions of horror. Secretary Victor Lindbergh hovered with his leather-bound notebook, playing the calm, efficient aide. In the shadows stood Mr. Gustav the butler, starched uniform immaculate, the faint smell of furniture wax still clinging to him. Poirot turned his gaze first to the Baron, applying his director method with quiet precision. The performance. Karl clutched the shawl, tears streaming, voice cracking as he spoke of Ingrid's final words of love. Shoulders slumped correctly, hands wrung in approved despair. The tell, yet the tears dried too swiftly in the chill breeze, leaving no damp mark on his collar. His eyes flicked, not to his dead wife, but toward the villa, toward the safe hidden behind a painting. The psychology. I am reminded of the Ackroyd case in that quiet English village, where a man performed shock and sorrow so convincingly that even the local constabulary accepted it. He had rehearsed before mirrors, practiced the exact widening of eyes, the precise break in his voice. Yet one detail betrayed him. When offered tea, his hand poured without the slightest tremble, as genuine grief disrupts the body. It does not permit such steady control. The little grey cells understand. The performance may be perfect, but the soul cannot lie to the flesh. The truth, this man expected her death. His grief is costume, not feeling. You see it now, no? Already the mask begins to slip. Ah, but you say Poirot makes much of one dry collar. Bear with me, mon ami. Rain began to patter softly on the villa windows, hesitant as uncertain applause. A strong continental coffee was brought. Its bitter warmth contrasted the growing chill. Poirot arranged the sugar bowls in perfect symmetry, his small hands gesturing expressively as he addressed the shaken group. The stage of this island is elegant, he observed, but death has interrupted the script. Someone among you has forgotten their lines. The tension rises. Someone has already missed a cue. Countess Olga's perfume, cloying worth, overpowered the room, mixed now with underlying fear. She spoke of Ingrid's passion for Solstice swims, her voice steady as distant piano notes. Yet Poirot saw her kid gloves twist nervously, leather soft but strained. Victor offered alibis before anyone asked, words flowing too smoothly, like dialogue learned by heart. Mr. Gustav poured more coffee with mechanical grace, but his eyes avoided the comforting crackle of the fire. This actor plays perfect composure. But observe the twisted gloves. Where is the calm? As police covered the body and removed it, the night air grew colder, contrasting the drawing-room's fire warmth. Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve, ordering his thoughts. Mais oui, the psychology. It is everything. Why choose the solstice night, when every eye is watching? The answer lies not in the water, but in the motives behind the performance. Doors closed softly as guests retired, leaving only the sound of waves and the faint chime of the clock. The stage was set, and the actors had taken their places. Let the drama begin. Chapter 2. Enter the Player's Dawn. Arrived softly over Skaugårdholm, the pale midnight sun now climbing higher, warming the chill Baltic air. Poirot chose the villa's library for his formal interviews, a hushed stage of polished mahogany bookshelves, velvet curtains muffling the distant waves, and the faint scent of furniture wax mingling with fresh lilies, arranged in crystal vases. A grandfather clock stood in the corner, its slow, its measured chime marking each scene like a patient stage manager. Strong continental coffee steamed in porcelain cups, its bitter warmth contrasting the cool morning light filtering through tall windows. Poirot sat behind the wide desk, his small hands arranging pens and notepads with perfect symmetry. He adjusted his magnificent moustache with precision and began directing the first player. Baron Karl von Sturm entered first. His footsteps were heavy on the parquet floor. A thin trail of Cuban cigar smoke followed him like stage fog. He wore the same rough tweed jacket from the night before, now creased. He sat, performing the role of the grieving widower with careful dignity. Ingrid adored these solstice nights, he said, voice low and steady. She always swam at midnight, said the water felt alive. His sandalwood cologne filled the space, clashing with the floral notes. Observe, mon ami, this husband plays sorrow almost too perfectly. No stumble, no raw edge. Watch carefully. Poirot noted the dry eyes, the quick glance toward his wristwatch, when he thought no one observed. Your timeline, monsieur. Where exactly were you between 11:30 and 12:15? Karl answered smoothly, on the upper terrace, smoking, alone. Yet a servant had seen him near the boathouse stairs much later than claimed. The mask slips, just a fraction. Did you catch the glance at the watch? Anxiety, not grief. Elsa von Sturm entered next. Her silk dressing gown rustled softly as she crossed the room. She clutched a crisp linen handkerchief she never used. She sat, performing the fragile, dutiful daughter. Mother was strict, she said, eyes lowered, but I loved her. Her fingers trembled slightly on the smooth crystal water glass she held. The air still carried the faint, dry memory of last night's champagne. Ask yourself, why does she avoid looking directly at Poirot? What role is she desperate to maintain? She claimed she had been on the East Terrace, speaking with Countess Olga until nearly midnight. But Poirot had already noted a guest who saw her silhouette near the beach path at 12:10. A small contradiction, like a missed cue in the first act. Countess Olga Petrovna swept in third, still wearing the same velvet evening gown from the gala, now slightly crumpled. Her kid gloves were immaculate, but she twisted them unconsciously. Her heavy Chanel perfume overwhelmed the lilies. The wood smoke from the dying library fire curled around her words. She played the loyal, devastated friend with theatrical flair. Ingrid confided everything in me, she declared, Russian accent thickening for emphasis. We were like sisters. The careful observer, and you are becoming careful, mon ami, will notice the pause before confided. Too long, too rehearsed. Poirot questioned her gently about the argument he had overheard near the bonfire. Olga denied it, her voice rising just enough to sound indignant. Yet her gloves twisted harder. The leather creaked faintly. Victor Lindbergh, the secretary, followed. He carried his leather-bound notebook like a shield, movements brisk and efficient. The faint aroma of strong coffee clung to his jacket. He performed the loyal, indispensable aid, calm, helpful, precise. I was in the study until 12:30, organizing today's correspondence, he explained. Baroness von Sturm asked me to prepare several documents. but Poirot had already spoken with the night footman. Victor had left the study at 11:45 and not returned until after 1. Another small hole in the script. "You watch with Poirot, no?" You see how steadily he holds that notebook. Too steadily, after such a question. Finally, Mr. Gustave, the butler, closed the morning scenes. His starched uniform remained crisp despite the night's chaos, and the clean scent of furniture wax still surrounded him. He poured fresh hot coffee with mechanical grace, never spilling a drop. "I served drinks on the terrace until 12:15, sir," he said quietly. "Then I cleared the glasses and retired to the pantry." Yet a kitchen maid had seen him crossing the garden toward the boathouse at 12:20. His eyes, usually steady, flickered once toward the library door as he spoke. This performance, it is most carefully rehearsed. In truth does not need such perfect timing. Poirot made an expressive gesture with his small hands, summarizing the morning's work. Each of you has entered the stage and taken your mark. Grieving husband, bereaved daughter, loyal friend, devoted secretary, faithful servant. Each has delivered lines, some smooth, some with tiny hesitations. But alibis, mes amis, they are like scripts. When they are genuine, small errors appear naturally. When they are false, and they are either too perfect, or they contain deliberate omissions. The group was summoned to an informal luncheon on the terrace afterward. Crystal glasses tinkled against marble. The taste of chilled dry champagne lingered bitterly on every tongue. Rain began again, soft pattering on the canvas awning above, underscoring the growing tension. Fire crackled in the outdoor hearth, sending wood smoke curling into the damp air. Bravo! But the performances, they were not entirely convincing, and the Baron's too steady watch-checking, Elsa's trembling fingers on untouched water, Olga's theatrical pause before confided, Victor's notebook held like armor, Gustave's single flicker towards the door. The tension rises. Someone will soon forget their next line. Every actor had taken their mark. But who played truth and who played lies? Chapter 3. The first act midday sun bathed Skargård Holm in pale northern light, turning the rocky beach into a stark open stage. Poirot walked alone along the shore where the Baroness had been found, pebbles crunching roughly beneath his polished shoes. The air carried salt, lingering wood smoke from the now dead bonfire, and the faint metallic tang of seaweed. Discarded champagne flutes lay half-buried in the shingle, their crystal catching light like forgotten props. He bent to examine the exact spot. Shallow water lapping gently now, but drag marks. Subtle, but almost erased by tide, suggested the body had not simply floated there by chance. Someone had positioned her with care. Back inside the villa, the drawing room offered warmth against the chill. The fire crackled steadily, sending curls of wood smoke upward to mingle with fresh lilies in tall vases. Velvet curtains were drawn halfway, softening the light on silk-upholstered chairs. Guests gathered uneasily. Crystal decanters tinkled as nervous hands poured more strong coffee. Poirot entered, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve, and immediately resumed direction. He called Elsa von Sturm forward first. She stood near the marble mantel, silk dressing gown rustling faintly, kid gloves clenched at her sides. "Mademoiselle, your alibi. It does not align," Poirot said quietly. A guest saw your silhouette on the beach path at 12:10. Yet you claimed the East Terrace with Countess Olga until midnight." Elsa's lips parted. For the first time, a genuine tremor appeared. Her tears welled, real ones this time, mascara beginning to streak. I went down to speak with Mother," she whispered. "We argued. I left her alive. I swear it." The mask slips. Did you catch it? Those are the first real tears we have seen. Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head, green eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "An argument? About what, precisely?" Elsa hesitated, then admitted inheritance, control, a forbidden attachment she would not name. The confession came haltingly, unlike her earlier polished lines. The room grew quieter. Only the grandfather clock chimed, and the fire snapped in response. Next, Countess Olga Petrovna. She sat ramrod straight on a velvet sofa, heavy Chanel still clinging to her, now mixed with nervous perspiration. Poirot turned the spotlight. "Madam, jealousy is a powerful costume. You played the devoted friend beautifully until last night near the bonfire. I myself heard raised voices, it yours and the Baroness's." Olga's gloved hands twisted, leather creaked softly. "Nonsense," she snapped, but the Russian accent thickened, betraying strain. Poirot produced a small, scorched fragment of paper retrieved from the library fireplace, an old letter hinting at a long-ago affair between Olga and Baron Karl. "This was not completely burned," he observed. "Jealousy does not vanish with flame." Watch this performance carefully. The twisting gloves, or the sudden thickening of accent. Where is the calm friend now? Victor Lindbergh fared no better. Poirot placed the secretary's leather-bound notebook on the low table. "Monsieur, the accounts you organized show discrepancies. Large sums moved quietly over months. The Baroness discovered this, no?" Victor paled. When he reached for his coffee cup, a single drop spilled, an uncharacteristic tremor. "It was administrative error," he stammered. But the ledger pages told a clearer story. Embezzlement, small at first, growing bolder. This actor plays loyalty. But observe the spill. Where is the perfect steadiness of yesterday? Poirot now applied his full director method to Mr. Gustave, who stood near the doorway like a stagehand, hoping to remain unseen. The performance. Gustave had served throughout the gala, and afterward with impeccable calm. Voice even, hands never shaking as he poured champagne and later coffee, a posture rigid with correct deference. The tell. Today his cologne was applied more heavily than usual, almost masking something, sweat perhaps, or the faint trace of sea salt that should not have lingered on a man who claimed to have stayed indoors after midnight. The psychology. I am reminded of the Orient Express affair, where a man of service performed his duty with such flawless routine amid murder that suspicion passed him by, for a time. He had rehearsed every gesture. He timed every appearance in the corridor, kept his uniform spotless, even in crisis. Yet one small error betrayed him. He avoided looking directly into any mirror, for he could not bear to see his own guilt reflected. The body knows what the mind tries to hide. Over-preparation is itself a confession. The little grey cells recognize this pattern. The servant who polishes his mask too brightly often conceals the deepest shadow. The truth, Monsieur Gustave, you were seen near the boathouse at 12:20. Your heavy scent today is not mere habit. It covers the Baltic's trace. You are connected to this death more closely than a butler should be. You see it now, no? The first real crack has appeared. Ah, but you say Poirot suspects a man because of too much cologne. Bear with me, mon ami. In quiet reflection afterward, alone by the window, as rain resumed its soft patter, Poirot considered the deeper theatre at work, that humans wear masks not merely to deceive others, but to survive themselves. Fear of judgment, of loss, of being seen without adornment, these force even the wealthy to perform. On this elegant island stage, grief performs as tears, sometimes dry, loyalty as steady hands, sometimes trembling, friendship as perfume and kind words, sometimes hiding old hate. I recall the Blue Train mystery, where a desperate woman masked her terror behind jewels and laughter. She rehearsed composure in empty compartments, practiced smiles before cabin mirrors. Yet truth emerged in one unguarded sigh when she believed herself alone. Deception exhausts the soul. No mask fits forever. The edges always fray under patient observation. So it is here. Each suspect has begun to show the seam. For you, mon ami, remember, the most convincing performance often conceals the greatest fear. Watch how these actors falter now. Their slips are lessons in human fragility. The careful observer will note Gustave's averted eyes as he left the room. Leather chairs creaked as the group dispersed. Bitter coffee cooled in forgotten cups. Rain tapped insistently on the glass. The first act concluded. Some masks had cracked. Chapter 4. Rehearsed Lines. The afternoon light slanted low across the marble terrace of Skagardholm, turning the Baltic into a sheet of pale silver. A chill wind carried the sharp scent of salt and wet stone, and mingling with the last traces of hothouse roses wilting in their outdoor urns. Poirot gathered the entire cast here. Open air, no velvet curtains to hide behind. The marble floor felt cold even through shoes. Hot coffee was served in crystal cups, steam rising like nervous breath. A small outdoor hearth crackled, sending curls of wood smoke upward, but it could not warm the growing tension. Poirot stood at the centre, like a director addressing his company on opening night. He smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve and began pressing the scripts. "Baron Karl," he said first, voice calm but precise. "Your lines are smooth, too smooth. You claim you remained on the upper terrace, smoking until after midnight. Yet the boathouse lantern was lit at 12:10, and a figure in tweed was seen descending the stairs." Karl's cigar trembled between his fingers. Ash fell unheeded onto his rough jacket. I only went down briefly to check the ropes, but the wind was rising. His sandalwood cologne seemed suddenly overpowering in the open air. Observe, mon ami, this husband now plays outraged innocence, but observe the falling ash. His hand is no longer steady. Elsa von Sturm stood beside her father, silk shawl clutched tightly, kid gloves creased from constant twisting. Poirot turned to her next. "Mademoiselle, you admitted the argument on the beach path, yet you still insist you returned directly to the East Terrace and remained with Countess Olga. A kitchen maid, however, saw a woman in pale silk near the water's edge at 12:25, carrying something heavy." Elsa's face drained of colour. Her lips parted, but no sound came at first. Then, haltingly, I only wanted to make sure she was all right after we fought. I didn't touch her, I swear." Her voice cracked. Genuine this time, no rehearsal left. The mask slips again. Did you catch the break in her voice? Rehearsal is failing. Truth stumbles forward. Countess Olga Petrovna sat apart on a wrought-iron chair. Velvet evening coat pulled tightly around her despite the weak sun. Her heavy Chanel perfume fought the sea air and lost. Poirot produced the scorched letter fragment once more, holding it up so the wind fluttered it like a tiny flag. Madame, this speaks of an old passion between you and the Baron. Jealousy makes an excellent motive. You were seen leaving the bonfire shortly after the Baroness alone. Where did you go?" Olga's gloved hands clenched the chair arms. Leather groaned softly. "I went to my room. I had a headache." But her Russian accent thickened with strain, and her eyes darted toward Baron Karl for the briefest second. Ask yourself, why does she look to him now? What old script are they still trying to follow together? Victor Lindbergh stood stiffly near the balustrade, leather notebook clutched like a lifeline. Old Poirot placed a thin ledger page before him. Columns of figures circled in red ink. "Monsieur, the Baroness discovered these transfers 2 weeks ago. She confronted you yesterday morning. The maid overheard. Last night you were not in the study as claimed. You were seen near the service stairs leading to the beach." Victor's hand jerked. Coffee sloshed over the rim of his cup, staining the marble. "It was a misunderstanding. I only wanted to explain." The tremor was unmistakable now. No more perfect secretary. "This performance, it is cracking. Truth does not require such desperate steadiness." Finally, Mr. Gustave, standing a little apart like a stagehand who suddenly finds himself in the spotlight. His starched uniform remained impeccable, but the heavy application of cologne could not entirely mask the faint trace of sea salt still clinging to his cuffs. Poirot spoke quietly. "Monsieur Gustave, your errand to the boathouse at 12:20. You carried no tray, no message, yet you returned with wet shoes, and the small vial found near the body. It bears a trace of your furniture polish on the cap." Gustave's posture remained rigid, but his eyes flickered once toward the sea. "I checked the lantern, sir. Nothing more. Bravo! But the performance falters." That single flicker toward the water, guilt's involuntary cue. Poirot made an expressive gesture with his small hands. "Is encompassing them all. Rehearsed lines, mesdames et messieurs, begin to show their strain. Alibis that once flowed smoothly now stumble. Motives, greed, jealousy, resentment, fear, have stepped out from behind the curtain. The script you prepared together is failing because truth needs no rehearsal. It simply is." Rain began again, soft at first, then steadier, tapping on the canvas awning like impatient fingers. The hearth fire hissed as drops fell. Wood smoke thickened. Champagne from a forgotten bottle stood flat and warm on the table, its dry taste forgotten. Crystal glasses trembled slightly in several hands. The tension rises. We approach the moment when someone must either confess or break completely. You watch with Poirot, no? You see how each of them shifts, small unconscious movements that betray more than words. The careful observer will notice Baron Karl's cigar has gone out entirely, forgotten in his fingers. Elsa's shawl has slipped to the ground, unguarded. Olga's gloves are now twisted, almost to tearing. Victor's notebook lies open, pages fluttering in the wind. Gustave's perfect posture has developed the faintest stoop. Rehearsed lines began to falter. Truth needed no rehearsal. Chapter 5. The Mask Slips. Evening descended over Shaggood Holm with dramatic suddenness, the pale solstice light giving way to a deep, bruised twilight. Inside the drawing-room, the fire roared high, as casting flickering shadows across velvet curtains and polished mahogany. The air was thick with the scent of lilies beginning to fade, mingled with lingering cigar smoke and the sharp bite of fresh coffee. crystal glasses stood half full on side tables, their icy champagne long gone flat. Rain lashed the tall windows in rhythmic bursts like an impatient audience demanding the next act. Poirot had summoned them all here. No more private scenes, no more whispered alibis, and the entire cast stood or sat in a loose semicircle around the low table, where he had placed Victor Lindbergh's leather-bound notebook and the small cracked vial found near the water's edge. He drew himself up to his full, still modest height, green eyes gleaming with quiet certainty. "Monsieur Lindbergh," Poirot began, voice soft yet commanding, "your performance as the loyal secretary has been admirable until now." He opened the notebook to the marked page. "These figures show transfers you authorized without the Baroness's knowledge. She confronted you yesterday morning. Last night you left the study not at 12:30, but at 11:45. You were seen on the service stairs leading to the beach." Victor's face drained of colour. His hands, usually so steady, shook violently. The notebook slipped from his fingers and fell open on the rug. The tension rises. Someone is about to break character completely. Victor stared at the fallen book as though it had betrayed him personally. Then, in a low, cracked voice, She found out about the money. She said she would ruin me, call the police, expose everything. I only wanted to talk to her again to explain. I followed her down to the water. We argued. She turned away. I pushed her. Just once. She fell. The tide took her." Tears, real hot, unpracticed, spilled down his cheeks. He collapsed into the nearest chair, shoulders heaving. Oh, the mask had fallen. Beneath it, the true face at last. Poirot watched without interruption, letting the confession hang in the warm air. Then he turned slowly to Elsa von Sturm, who stood frozen near the fireplace, silk gown catching the firelight. "Mademoiselle, your turn in the spotlight. You admitted the argument on the beach path. You went back to check on your mother, yet your silk slippers, brought to me by the maid, bear traces of wet sand and seaweed. And there is the small matter of the bruise on her cheek, hidden under powder. A handprint, fresh." Elsa's breath caught audibly. She clutched the mantel for support. Her kid gloves slid against the marble. I slapped her," she whispered. "She called Victor a thief, said I was throwing my life away on a criminal. She said she would cut me off completely. I was so angry. I hit her. Then I ran. I didn't know she would fall. I didn't mean—" Her voice dissolved into genuine sobs. Raw, noisy, a mascara streaking freely. No dry handkerchief this time. Watch this performance. No, this is no longer performance. Observe the shaking shoulders, the ruined makeup. Real feeling at last. Poirot employed his director method once more, this time on Elsa, speaking clearly so all could hear. The performance, until this moment, she had played the fragile, grieving daughter, tears rehearsed, posture delicate, voice soft with sorrow. The tell, but earlier the tears were dry, the sobs mechanical, or the posture too erect, even in supposed grief. Genuine sorrow bends the spine, blurs the eyes, trembles the hands uncontrollably. The psychology. I am reminded of the Nile cruise tragedy, where a young woman feigned devotion to a parent while nursing deep resentment. She rehearsed her lines in the privacy of her cabin, practiced the exact pitch of distress, the correct tremble of lip. Yet one fatal error. When recounting the death, her gaze remained steady and focused, never scattering. True emotion scatters thought. It does not allow such perfect recall. The little grey cells understand. Long-suppressed rage does not perform. It erupts. When the mask of duty cracks, what spills out is often fury, not love. The truth, Mademoiselle Elsa, you struck your mother in rage that night. You did not drown her, but your blow contributed to the sequence. Your innocence was costume. You see it now, no? Ah, but you say Poirot judges too harshly on posture and dry tears. Bear with me. Mon ami. The room fell silent, except for the fire's crackle and the rain's steady drumming. Countess Olga Petrovna sat rigid gloved hands locked in her lap, Chanel perfume now cloying in the overheated space. Baron Karl stared at his daughter as though seeing her for the first time. Mr. Gustav stood near the door, posture still correct but face ashen. Poirot made an expressive gesture with his small hands. We have seen two masks fall tonight. Victor, driven by fear of ruin. Elsa, driven by years of resentment exploding in one moment. But the true director of this tragedy remains. The poison in the vial was not Victor's doing alone. The fingerprints are smudged, but the scent, faint but unmistakable, is Chanel number 5, and only one person reapplied perfume obsessively after midnight. He turned fully to Countess Olga. Madame, your performance has been the most brilliant of all. Shock, outrage, helpful cooperation. Yet you made one small, fatal error. After the deed, you returned to your room and reapplied your signature scent to cover the Baltic salt on your hands and the trace of poison on your breath. No one else went into the water that night, only the murderer. Olga's lips parted. No sound came. Her gloves began to tremble violently. The fire popped loudly, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. This actor played innocence, but observe, the trembling gloves, the frozen silence, the mask is about to shatter completely. The careful observer, and you have become very careful, mon ami, will notice how her posture has collapsed forward. How the proud Russian shoulders now hunched like a cornered animal. The spotlight of truth burns brightest when the actor can no longer sustain the role. The mask had fallen. Beneath it, the true face at last. Chapter 6. Behind the curtain night had fully claimed Schaagardholm. The drawing-room, once bright with Solstice gaiety, now felt like backstage after the performance. Dimmed lights, scattered props, the scent of dying lilies, heavy and sweet. The fire had burned low, sending occasional sparks up the chimney with faint crackles. Rain continued its steady tattoo on the windows. A soft underscore to revelations. Poirot moved among the suspects like a director inspecting the scenery after the actors have left the stage, revealing what had been hidden in the wings. He began with Baron Karl von Sturm, and the widower sat slumped in a deep leather armchair, tweed jacket rumpled, unlit cigar forgotten between his fingers. Poirot placed before him a small stack of private letters, retrieved from the villa safe. Gambling debts, mounting over years, signed promissory notes to discreet lenders in Stockholm. Monsieur, your wife knew of these. She refused to pay them last month. You argued violently the week before the gala. Karl's shoulders sagged further. The rough tweed seemed to swallow him. She said she would leave everything to Elsa, cut me out completely. I was desperate. His voice was low, broken, no performance left. Observe, mon ami, behind the grieving husband's mask lay a man drowning in debt. Greed performed as love, desperation as loyalty. Countess Olga Petrovna remained standing near the velvet curtains, gloved hands clasped so tightly the kid leather creaked. Poirot produced another item. A faded photograph slipped from an old jewel box. Olga and Baron Karl, young, laughing on a Riviera terrace, dated 20 years earlier. Madame, this was not burned completely with the letter. Your loyal friendship to Ingrid had deeper roots and deeper wounds. Olga's face crumpled. Chanel perfume could no longer mask the tremor in her voice. I loved him first. She took him. I forgave, or thought I did. But seeing them together every year, hearing her laugh at my expense. Tears came then. Real, silent, streaking powder. The mask slips further. Jealousy, who long curtained, now stands exposed in the spotlight. Victor Lindbergh and Mr. Gustave were addressed together. Poirot laid out correspondence found in Gustave's pantry, a series of coded notes between the two men, dating back 3 years. Small thefts at first, then larger embezzlements, always funneled through Victor's accounts. You were not merely employer and servant, Poirot said quietly. You were partners in a quiet conspiracy. The Baroness discovered the pattern. She planned to dismiss you both after the solstice. Victor stared at the floor. Gustave's perfect posture finally broke. He leaned against the doorframe, face ashen. We only wanted enough to start over, Gustave whispered. She would have destroyed us. Ask yourself, why do servants and secretaries form secret alliances? What hidden motive binds them when society keeps them apart? Elsa von Sturm sat apart, knees drawn up beneath her silk gown, mascara tracks dried on her cheeks. Poirot approached last. From her dressing table, he had taken a small velvet box containing an engagement ring, simple, tasteful, hidden beneath handkerchiefs. Mademoiselle, this ring was never worn openly. Victor proposed 2 months ago. Your mother forbade it, called him a fortune hunter. That was the true root of your final argument. Elsa nodded once, slowly. She said I was throwing away my future. She said she would disinherit me if I married him. I hated her in that moment. Her voice was small, exhausted, no more rehearsal possible. This performance of filial duty hid a forbidden love. But observe the exhausted slump. Truth had stripped the last pretense. Poirot stepped back, allowing silence to settle like dust after a curtain falls. In quiet reflection, he considered the deeper machinery of this island drama. Behind every curtain in the theatre of crime lies a secret. Behind every secret, a motive waiting to direct the action, whose psychology teaches us that humans conceal not only from others, but from themselves. Greed masks as necessity, jealousy as wounded pride, resentment as justified anger, forbidden love as youthful rebellion. Society's elegant stages, country houses, galas, families, demand these performances most fiercely. The wealthy especially must appear flawless. Cracks are intolerable. I recall the case of the Crooked House, where a family performed unity while hatred festered beneath her. Each member rehearsed their role: devoted child, loyal spouse, benevolent patriarch. Yet one by one, their masks slipped in private moments. A clenched fist when alone, a whispered curse behind a closed door, a glance of pure venom across the breakfast table. The murderer had hidden motive so deeply that even they believed their own performance, until the pressure of investigation forced truth into the open. Motives are patient actors. They wait in the wings until the spotlight finds them. Here on Skärgårdholm, the same pattern repeats. Debt drove Karl. Old passion drove Olga. Survival drove Victor and Gustave. Suppressed rage and love drove Elsa. Each believed their secret safe behind the curtain, yet no curtain holds forever against persistent light. Universal truth, mon ami. Secrets exhaust the keeper. The soul grows tired of maintaining the illusion. When scrutiny arrives, the body betrays first a tremor, averted gaze, an over-applied scent. Then the words falter, and the tears come unbidden. The confession spills. For you who watch this drama unfold, remember, the most tightly guarded motive is often the one that most desperately needs to be spoken. Listen for the moment when the actor can no longer sustain the role. That is when truth steps forward. Bravo! The curtains have been drawn back. Alliances, passions, hatreds, all exposed. The grandfather clock chimed once, low and final. Doors closed softly as suspects drifted toward their rooms, as footsteps heavy on parquet. Rain eased to a whisper. Behind every curtain, a secret. Behind every secret, a motive. Chapter 7. The Final Act. The drawing-room of Skagotholm had become the ultimate stage. Every velvet curtain was drawn tight against the storm-lashed windows, sealing the room in a cocoon of firelight and tension. The hearth blazed high, crackling fiercely. Wood smoke curled upward to mingle with the heavy scent of wilting lilies and the faint, stubborn trace of Countess Olga's Chanel No. 5. Crystal glasses stood untouched on side tables, champagne long flat and forgotten. The grandfather clock ticked solemnly in the corner, counting down to the inevitable curtain. Poirot had summoned them all, every actor in this long, twisted drama. They stood or sat in a ragged semicircle. Baron Karl, shoulders bowed inside his rumpled tweed. Elsa, pale and mascara-streaked in her silk gown. Victor Lindbergh, notebook abandoned, hands trembling, Mr. Ed Gustav, posture finally broken, starched uniform creased for the first time. And Countess Olga Petrovna, rigid in her velvet coat, gloved hands locked so tightly the kid leather shone white at the seams. Poirot stepped into the centre of the circle. He drew himself up to his full, still modest height, smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve, and tilted his egg-shaped head. His green eyes gleamed with quiet, unshakable certainty. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, a voice soft yet carrying to every corner of the room, "you have each performed for Hercule Poirot, some of you with truth, most of you with artifice. Tonight the theatre ends. Let us review the performances, shall we?" He turned first to Baron Karl. "Monsieur le Baron, you played the grieving widower with admirable restraint. Tears at the right moment, voice breaking on cue. But grief does not pause to check the contents of a safe while a wife lies dead on the shore. Your debts were crushing. Ingrid refused to pay them. You knew she planned to rewrite her will after the solstice. Poison was your first attempt, subtle, deniable. When it failed to act quickly enough, you helped stage the drowning. But steady hands poured champagne too soon after tragedy. A grieving man does not toast the future so calmly." Karl's unlit cigar slipped from his fingers and rolled across the rug. He made no move to retrieve it. Poirot turned to Elsa. "Mademoiselle Elsa, you performed the fragile, loving daughter, tears rehearsed, posture delicate. Yet dutiful daughters do not strike their mothers across the face in rage over money and a forbidden fiancé. Your handprint remained on her cheek beneath the powder. You ran, yes, but you left her stunned and vulnerable on the rocks. Your resentment was not new. It had rehearsed in silence for years." Elsa's shoulders shook once. A single genuine sob escaped. "Countess Olga Petrovna," Poirot continued, voice dropping lower, "Hector, your role was the most brilliant of all. The loyal friend, shocked and helpful, full of elegant outrage. Magnifique! You comforted, you advised, you even suggested the midnight swim might have been accidental. Yet loyalty does not poison a rival's drink out of 20-year-old jealousy. Nor does it reapply Chanel obsessively after wading into the Baltic to hold a woman's head beneath the waves, covering the salt, covering the guilt. Your perfume betrayed you, madam. No one else entered the water that night." Olga's gloved hands jerked. One glove split along a seam with a tiny, audible tear. "Victor Lindbergh and Monsieur Gustave," Poirot said, gesturing to both men. "You played the loyal aide and the perfect servant. Yet innocent bystanders do not conspire for years to siphon funds, nor hide letters in fireplaces, nor carry vials bearing furniture polish. Your partnership was discovered. Ingrid planned to expose you both. Fear drove you to assist, but fear is a poor director. It leaves fingerprints." Victor dropped his head into his hands. Gustave leaned heavily against the wall, eyes closed. Poirot made an expressive gesture with his small hands, encompassing them all. "And so we come to our leading performer." He stepped closer to Countess Olga. The firelight caught the sheen of sweat on her brow, despite the chill seeping through the windows. "Madame, you gave the most convincing performance of all, and the shock when the body was found, the outrage at any suggestion of foul play, the helpful whispers to the police, the comforting arm around Elsa, a masterpiece, but you made one fatal error, one small human moment, when the mask slipped completely. After you held Ingrid beneath the waves, you returned to your room, hands shaking, clothes damp with seawater. And in your panic, in your need to erase every trace, you reapplied your signature perfume, not once, twice, and the scent was still fresh on your wrists when I spoke to you at 1:30. No one else had reason to mask salt and fear with Chanel at that hour." Olga's lips parted. A low animal sound escaped, half sob, half denial. Poirot employed his director method one final time, speaking clearly for all to hear. The performance. She had moved among them like tragedy's perfect confidant. Voice modulated, gestures graceful, sympathy timed to perfection. Oh, the tell. But the reapplication of perfume after midnight, obsessive, unnecessary unless one carried the Baltic's odour on skin and breath. Overcompensation, panic signature. The psychology. I recall the case of the ABC murderer, where a killer performed ordinary life so convincingly that neighbours remembered only his smiles. He rehearsed normalcy in mirrors, timed every casual greeting. Yet one repeated phrase, spoken too often and too brightly, betrayed obsession. Here, the perfume was that phrase. Habit turned frantic, routine turned confession. Jealousy does not vanish, it waits. When cornered, it overprepares its exit. The little grey cells see this always. The actor who polishes the facade too brightly reveals the rot beneath. The truth. Countess Olga Petrovna, you poisoned Ingrid first, slowly, carefully. When the poison acted too late, you followed her to the water and finished what you began. Hate performed as friendship. You see it now, no? Olga's knees buckled. She sank slowly onto the nearest velvet chair, gloves tearing further as she clutched at the arms. No more lines, no more mask. Poirot stepped back. The performance is over. The curtain falls. Truth takes her bow. The fire popped loudly, sending sparks dancing. Rain hammered the windows like final applause that would never come. The final act concluded. Only truth survived the curtain call. Chapter 8. Curtain Call. The storm had passed by, the time the police launch cut through the dark waters toward Skagerholm. Its engine rumbled low and steady, a final punctuation to the long night's drama. Floodlights from the boat swept across the marble terrace, turning wet stone into gleaming silver. Inside the villa, the drawing room felt suddenly too small, too warm, too full of spent emotion. The fire had burned down to glowing embers. Wood smoke lingered faintly, mixing with the cloying sweetness of dying lilies, and the stubborn trace of Chanel that still clung to Countess Olga's velvet coat. Poirot stood near the tall windows, hands clasped behind his back, watching the launch approach. He had already arranged the final pieces. The vial of poison, fingerprints now confirmed, the scorched letters, the ledger pages, the small velvet box with Elsa's hidden ring. Everything symmetrical on the low mahogany table, in like props returned neatly to their places after the final scene. The police officers entered first, 2 in uniform, 1 senior inspector in civilian coat, his boots leaving faint wet prints on the parquet. They moved with quiet efficiency, no drama, no raised voices. Handcuffs clicked open with a soft metallic sound sharper than any crystal chime. Countess Olga Petrovna rose slowly from the velvet chair where she had collapsed. Her gloves were torn at the seams, one hung in ragged strips, but she made no protest when the senior inspector stepped forward. "Countess Olga Petrovna," he said formally, "you are under arrest for the murder of Baroness Ingrid von Sturm." The cuffs closed around her wrists. Kid leather and steel met with a muted snap. She lifted her chin once, proud, defiant, then allowed herself to be led towards the door. Her velvet coat trailed behind her like a fallen curtain. No tears now, only silence. Baron Karl von Sturm remained seated, head bowed, a tweed jacket creased beyond repair. As Olga passed, he did not look up. "She blackmailed me for years," he whispered to no one in particular. "Threatened to tell Ingrid everything about the debts, about us. I thought if Ingrid died, it would end." His voice cracked on the last word. Poirot regarded him without judgment. "Monsieur, blackmail ends only when truth is spoken. You chose silence instead." Elsa von Sturm stood near the fireplace, arms wrapped tightly around herself, a silk gown now hopelessly crumpled. When the officers moved to question her about the slap, she spoke first, small, steady voice. "I struck her, I admit it, but I did not drown her. I ran away. I left her there." Tears came again, quieter this time, genuine. The inspector nodded once. No cuffs for her. Not yet. Statements would be taken, charges considered. But the raw confession hung in the air like smoke, truth stripped of rehearsal. Victor Lindbergh and Mr. Gustav were addressed together, but the inspector read the charges: conspiracy to defraud, accessory after the fact in the murder. Victor's leather notebook was already bagged as evidence, Gustav's pantry letters likewise. Neither man spoke much. Victor's hands shook as cuffs closed. Gustav's posture, once so rigidly perfect, now slumped forward like a marionette with cut strings. "We never meant murder," Victor murmured. "Only money, enough to leave." Gustav said nothing at all. His starched uniform seemed suddenly too large for him. As the group was led toward the launch, the villa emptied slowly. Footsteps echoed on parquet and marble, once hurried and purposeful, now heavy and final. Doors closed softly behind them, one after another, each click a small curtain falling. Rain had stopped. The Baltic lapped gently against the rocks below, almost apologetic. Poirot remained in the drawing-room a moment longer. He arranged the last items on the table with careful precision. Sugar bowls aligned, pens parallel, notebook closed. Then he smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve and stepped out onto the terrace. The night air was cold and clean, carrying only salt and distant pine. Stars had begun to appear through thinning clouds, faint pinpricks in the northern sky. The launch pulled away slowly, its lights shrinking toward the horizon. No sirens, no shouts, only the low throb of the engine fading into silence. Inside the villa, the grandfather clock chimed once, soft, almost regretful. The fire popped its last ember and died. Crystal glasses stood abandoned, catching moonlight on their smooth rims. The scent of lilies would linger for days, a ghostly reminder of the performance now ended. Baron Karl would face charges of conspiracy and attempted fraud. His debts would be settled in court, not in secret. Elsa would inherit what remained, perhaps enough to rebuild, perhaps enough to learn. Victor and Gustav would serve time, but shorter sentences for cooperation. Olga's trial would be the spectacle the newspapers craved. Jealousy, poison, midnight drowning under the solstice sun that never set. Poirot watched the launch disappear entirely. Then he turned back toward the villa, small hands clasped behind him. No applause followed this performance, no curtain calls, no encores, only justice, quiet, methodical, inevitable. The curtain call came. No applause, only justice. Chapter 9. After the show dawn broke over the Swedish archipelago with gentle clarity, the solstice sun rising low and pale, turning the Baltic waters to liquid silver. Skärgårdholm lay quiet now. No yachts bobbing at the dock, no laughter echoing across the terrace, no tinkling crystal or rustling silk. The villa's marble floors still held the chill of night. The velvet curtains hung motionless, heavy with the scent of dying lilies and faint wood smoke from the long-dead fire. Only the grandfather clock continued its steady chime, marking time in an emptied theatre. The police launch had departed hours earlier, carrying Countess Olga Petrovna away in handcuffs, her torn gloves and velvet coat a final, crumpled costume. Victor Lindbergh and Mr. Gustav followed in silence, their leather notebook and starched uniform now evidence rather than props. Baron Karl von Sturm remained behind, he alone in the drawing-room, tweed jacket discarded over a chair like a shed skin. He sat staring at the cold hearth, unlit cigar forgotten on the mantel. For the first time in years, no mask remained, no performance of the grieving widower, no pretense of control. Only a tired man facing the wreckage of his choices. Elsa von Sturm moved through the villa with quiet purpose. She had changed from silk to simple tweed trousers and a wool jumper, practical, unadorned. Her mascara tracks were gone, he washed away with cold water and resolve. She paused in the library, running her fingers along the polished mahogany shelves, then opened the safe herself. Inside lay the new will Ingrid had prepared but never signed. Everything to Elsa, with strict provisions for charitable trusts, and no provision for Karl's debts. Elsa read it slowly, then closed the safe without anger. Mother wanted control even in death, she murmured to the empty room. But I will use it differently. Poirot watched from the doorway, small hands clasped behind him. He had employed his director method one last time, not for accusation, but for understanding. The performance of the past days. They had all worn their roles like armour: grief, loyalty, innocence, servitude. Postures rehearsed, voices modulated, tears timed. The tell, now in the aftermath, the armour lay scattered, shoulders relaxed naturally. Eyes met without evasion, hands moved without tremor. A genuine relief does not need rehearsal. It simply arrives. The psychology. I'm reminded of the cards on the table case, where a group of murderers performed ordinary life together for years, each hiding their portion of guilt behind smiles and civility. They rehearsed normalcy at dinner parties, timed every casual remark, kept their secrets curtained even from each other. Yet when the truth emerged, the survivors did not collapse into despair. They exhaled. Shoulders dropped, breaths deepened, conversations became honest for the first time. Release manifests in the body's return to ease. Masks are heavy, and truth, though painful, is lighter. Here on this island, the same pattern repeats. Confession has stripped the artifice. What remains is not ruin, but possibility. The truth. The theatre has purged its illusions. You see it now, no? Ah, but you say, Poirot finds hope in handcuffs. Bear with me, mon ami. Elsa approached her father. Archie placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. No embrace, only quiet contact. The debts will be paid from the estate, she said, not to protect you, but to close the chapter. After that, you must find your own way. Carl looked up. His eyes were dry, but clearer than they had been in years. I will, he answered simply. No excuses, no performance. Outside, the rocky shore lay peaceful. The place where Ingrid's body had floated now showed only gentle waves lapping at clean pebbles, and no drag marks remained. The tide had erased them. A single champagne flute, overlooked by the police, rested half-buried in shingle, crystal catching the first strong rays of sun. Poirot stepped onto the terrace, breathing the cold, salt, clean air. The chill contrasted pleasantly with the memory of the overheated drawing-room. He arranged a few scattered deck chairs into perfect symmetry, an unconscious habit, then gazed across the water toward the mainland. Our yachts would return soon to collect the remaining staff and guests. The island would empty completely by noon. Transformations had already begun. Elsa would not become her mother. She spoke quietly of turning part of the inheritance into scholarships for young women. Practical help, not gilded control. Carl faced ruin, but also freedom. No more blackmail, no more secrets. Victor and Gustav would serve sentences, shorter for their cooperation. Prison, though harsh, he offered structure they had once craved in their conspiracy. Olga's trial would be long and public, but justice, once set in motion, moves with its own inexorable rhythm. The setting itself had changed. Elegant stage had become crime scene, then theatre of revelation, and now peaceful stillness. No more spotlights, no more cues. Only the soft lapping of waves and the distant cry of gulls. Poirot tilted his head, green eyes thoughtful. The theatre empties, he murmured, but the lessons remain. Masks may be discarded, but the faces beneath them carry the memory of what was worn and why. He turned back toward the villa one last time. The front door stood open. Sunlight poured across the parquet, warming the cold marble. A faint scent of furniture wax lingered. Mr. Gustav's last, unconscious gift. The theatre emptied, but the lessons lingered. Chapter 10. Poirot reviews the performance. Hercule Poirot sat in the familiar comfort of his small London apartment, or the one overlooking the quiet square where pigeons strutted beneath plane trees. Afternoon light filtered through lace curtains, warming the polished mahogany table, where a pot of tisane steamed gently. The porcelain cup was arranged with perfect symmetry beside a single sugar cube and a neatly folded napkin. Outside, the city hummed distantly. Inside, only the soft tick of a mantel clock and the occasional sigh of steam from the kettle. A week had passed since the launch carried the players away from Skagerholm. Poirot had returned by train, first the night ferry, then the Orient Express route he so loved for its ordered rhythm, allowing the little grey cells to settle and review every scene. Newspapers now carried brief, restrained headlines. Swedish aristocrat charged in Solstice murder. Family secrets surface in archipelago tragedy. He had clipped them carefully, placing them beside his cup like program notes after a long performance. Countess Olga Petrovna awaited trial in Stockholm. Her lawyers spoke of diminished responsibility, of passion long suppressed. Victor Lindbergh and Mr. Gustav had pleaded guilty to fraud and accessory charges. Sentences would be moderate, perhaps 3 years each, with time already served in pre-trial detention. Baron Karl von Sturm had quietly entered a sanatorium near Geneva, debts being settled through the estate under Elsa's supervision. And Elsa herself, transformed most of all, had announced the creation of a small foundation in her mother's name. Scholarships for women studying finance and independence, the very fields Ingrid had once controlled so tightly. Poirot sipped his tisane, the herbal warmth soothing after the chill Baltic winds. He reflected deeply, as he always did when the curtain had fallen and the theatre emptied. Why do people perform rather than reveal the truth? The answer lies in the human soul's oldest instinct: protection. We wear masks because naked truth is vulnerable, open to judgment, to loss, to pain. Society, especially the elegant world of wealth and title, demands performance most fiercely. One must appear composed, generous, loyal, grieving when required. The rich cannot afford cracks in the facade. The poor cannot afford to show weakness. So greed dresses as ambition, our jealousy as wounded pride, hatred as loyalty, fear as calm efficiency. On Skagerholm, every actor believed their role necessary for survival. Olga's jealousy had rehearsed itself for 20 years. Smiles at galas, kind words at birthdays, perfume applied like armor. Karl's debts had worn the mask of the carefree husband until the bills arrived. Elsa's resentment had performed as dutiful daughter until one slap shattered the illusion, as Victor and Gustav had played servant and secretary, while quietly rewriting the script behind the scenes. Each believed the curtain would never rise on their private acts. Yet guilt always betrays the actor. The body cannot lie forever. A hand trembles when pouring champagne too soon after death. A perfume is reapplied obsessively to cover salt and fear. A notebook is clutched too tightly when questioned. Tears come dry at first, then flood when the mask can no longer hold, and the little grey cells understand this principle. The soul tires of deception long before the mind admits defeat. When scrutiny arrives, persistent, patient, unflinching, the performance falters. A missed cue, a spilled drop, an averted gaze, and truth steps forward, uninvited but inevitable. I'm reminded of the murder on the Orient Express. a theatre far more confined, yet no less intricate. 12 passengers performed innocence together, each rehearsing their portion of the alibi in narrow compartments. They timed glances, synchronized stories, smiled at breakfast as though no blood stained the snow outside. Yet one small inconsistency, the uniform button in the wrong place, the repeated phrase spoken too brightly, began the unravelling. Collective guilt is heavy. It demands perfect coordination. Individual guilt, as on Skagotholm, is lighter but more personal. Each actor carries their own tell, and their own moment of over-preparation or sudden collapse. In both cases, truth triumphs because human nature cannot sustain the lie indefinitely. The body knows authenticity. It rebels against the costume. The masks society imposes are many: class, gender, family duty, professional loyalty. Women like Ingrid must perform poise and control. Men like Carl must perform strength and provision. Daughters must play devotion. Friends must play support. When these roles chafe too long, resentment festers, love twists into obsession, fear hardens into conspiracy. Yet revelation, though painful, brings release. Elsa now walks lighter, unburdened by a mother's shadow. Carl faces ruin, but also honesty, no more secrets to guard. Even Olga, in her cell, may one day find the strange freedom of no longer pretending. Why does truth ultimately triumph over performance? Because the theatre of crime is built on sand. Lies require constant maintenance, new lines, new gestures, a new scents to cover old ones. Truth requires only one moment of stillness. When the spotlight of order and method shines, the sand shifts, the curtain tears. The actor stands exposed, not destroyed, but seen. Poirot set the cup down with a soft clink. He arranged the newspaper clippings one final time, edges perfectly aligned. Outside, the square grew quiet as evening approached. Pigeons settled on ledges. A distant clock chimed the hour. Final wisdom, as mes amis, watch the performances around you closely. Listen for the tremor beneath the steady voice, the over-applied scent masking fear, the glance that avoids the mirror. Slips teach us more about humanity than flawless lines ever could. The stage may change. Country house, luxury train, private island. But the actors remain the same. Frightened, proud, desperate, hopeful. And always, eventually, human. Until the next theatre of crime, mes amis, Poirot will be watching.